This presentation is brought to you by the City of Greensboro's Economic Development and Business Support Office.
A little bit about our organization, Strong Towns. I am from Minnesota. Our organization began there. We work nationwide. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to support a model of growth that allows America's towns to become financially strong and resilient. How many of you would call Greensboro a town? No? Yeah. The funny thing is I started talking about towns and cities. And over time, what we were really having a conversation about was local units of government. When we came to starting the nonprofit and naming the organization, we could have called it Strong Local Units of Government, but that would have been a really long, not very catchy name. So we called it Strong Towns. If I talk about cities, if I talk about towns, what I'm really here talking about are local units of government, the body that governs the places that we live and the things that are impacting their finances today. I want to take a step back with you and look at a narrative, a pair of narratives about our development pattern, the way we build our cities. These two photos, the one on the left, is an ancient city called Ur. This is an artist's rendering. It's the oldest civilization that has ever been excavated, 4000 BC. On the right, of course, is ancient Rome, another ancient city that we have studied. If you look at both of these places, you'll see a certain rhyming to the way they are laid out, the way they are designed, the way buildings are spaced, the way space is allocated. And that is, as we're taught in planning and engineering schools, a function of the way people got around. The technology of the day, if you wanted to go somewhere, was your own 2 feet. People walked. And because people walked, civilization, cities, the places people built were scaled in a certain way. The distances between certain types of buildings, the way that they're spaced between each other, the gaps in the system, etc., were all a function of a society of people who walked. And of course, you can come all the way up to my hometown in central Minnesota. This was taken in the early 1900s, was based around these same basic parameters. People walked everywhere they went, and so what you're seeing here is a pattern that has been repeated thousands of times across civilizations, across cultures, across different geographies and different climates. Beginning with really a little prior to the Depression, but then beginning in earnest after World War II, we came up with a different style of development, a different pattern. This one based on the new technology of the day, the automobile. We began to design different building types, different building styles, different ways of locating things and separating them, different ways of connecting them, all based around this technology of the automobile. In engineering school, in planning school, and as a general cultural narrative, we like to describe this as progress. The old technology was walking. We built cities around people who walked. The new technology is the automobile. We now logically build cities around the automobile. The next technology will be perhaps jet cars, and we will build cities differently around jet cars. And someday we'll have teleportation, and our cities will look completely different than they do today. This is just humanity progressing through different levels of technology. That's a comforting narrative. There's another way to look at this, though, that isn't quite as affirming of where we're at today. If you go back to those ancient civilizations and you look at the knowledge that went into building these places, it was a knowledge gained through trial and error. What you are seeing when you get up to early 1900 cities, including the way this city was built, what you are seeing is an application of general cultural knowledge that was developed over thousands and thousands of years of trial and error experimentation. People did what they knew worked. They copied what they saw done in other cities. And the operating system for a city like this was one that had proven itself to be financially strong and resilient over many thousands of years, over many different cultures worldwide, and many different civilizations. When we look at the modern approach to building, Well, it seems very familiar to all of us. To all of us, it seems like the way things are done, because for most of us, this is what we have known our entire life. Yet the traffic engineering profession is a mere 60 years old. The zoning standards, the way we finance places, the way that we lay things out, all of those are based on theories and ideas that have come to fruition over the last 50 to 80 years. This is a very, very young experiment. And that is what I want you to have in the back of your mind as we go forward with tonight. While this approach has stood the rigors of time, this approach is a very, very young experiment, one in which we all are, as a society, its lab rats. So let's talk about the way we finance things in this great American experiment. If you look at growth and development, and if you go back to Greensboro 100 years ago, if we wanted to have a new performing arts center, or a new road or street put in, or a new curb or sidewalk, or a new building, or if we wanted something that was going to create jobs, where was the money from that going to come from? It was going to come from us. Everything we did here locally, all the growth, all the innovation, all the development, was going to be a byproduct of things that happened here locally. If you fast forward to today, there's three distinct ways in this post-World War II experiment that we have come to finance growth and development. The first is something we call transfer payments between governments. This is the idea that now the state and federal government have a role in creating growth and development at the local level. This may be investing in the extension of a sewer system, helping to put in a street or a sidewalk, helping to build some type of civic structure. The assistance may come in the form of a grant or a loan or an earmark. The second mechanism of growth that we utilize is transportation spending. This is the idea that we pay gas tax to the state, we pay gas tax to the federal government. Those monies are pooled. They are then allocated towards projects which not only create jobs, but create a platform for growth to occur at the local level. We invest in transportation projects as a mechanism to create growth locally. The third mechanism then is debt. And while public sector debt is very important to this story, cities back at the end of World War II paid an average of 2% of their budget to debt service. Today that number on average is 18% and rising. So public sector debt is an important part of this narrative, but even more important than that is private sector debt. If you go back 100 years ago to my community, they didn't have 30-year mortgages. They had contract for deeds and very short-term financing where they finance anything at all. Today we have long-term financing. We have the ability of things to be securitized on a secondary market, which has driven down interest rates and flooded our system with the ability to borrow large amounts of money. When you add these mechanisms of growth together, we use them at the local level to create new growth, which of course we use to increase our tax base and increase the revenue that we have as local units of government. There's some very powerful incentives to look at these transactions as a positive thing. When the federal government comes in with a grant, when the DOT comes in and does a project, when the private sector comes in and does a development where they build all the infrastructure, we as local taxpayers pay very little of that transaction. Most of those costs are borne by someone else. We may have some staff time, we may have to contribute a little bit to the overall project, but the heavy lifting is done by someone else. We get, in the short term, however, this huge bump in our tax revenue. We don't spend very much, but the revenue that we have coming in as a local unit of government goes up substantially. The catch is that we agree to maintain over the long term all of these systems. We agree to fix the roads, the streets, the sidewalks, the pipe indefinitely far into the future. We are, in a sense, exchanging a short-term advantage from cash standpoint for a long-term liability that comes with all of that maintenance. If you think this through over multiple life cycles, there's only one of two ways that this makes sense as a long-term proposition. Either growth is going to continue at ever-accelerating rates. In other words, there's always going to be that much more new growth we can create, that we can use that initial cash advantage to make good on all the prior obligations we've made. Or the pattern of growth, the way we actually build our places, is going to generate more in wealth for us than it is going to generate in long-term costs. Now, unfortunately, we realize that this first statement is not true. We're not going to grow at ever-accelerating rates. It's a hard lesson. Some cities in this country had to wait till 2007 and 2008 to learn, but we know that today. Unfortunately, the second statement is also not true, and this is where, for a very brief moment, this presentation is going to get a touch technical. Just hang with me. I'll make it as painless as possible. I am allergic to theoretical models. I've had enough statistics in my life. I've worked with enough models in my life of very complex systems to realize that these models are really incapable of explaining exactly what is going on. And because I'm allergic to theoretical models, what we have done at Strong Towns is go out and study as many real-world developments as we can, breaking them down preferably into the smallest parts that we can analyze to try to get a sense of what exactly is going on. This is the simplest development that you could find. This is a residential 2.5 acre lot subdivision with a dead-end road with a cul-de-sac at the end. There are no commercial properties. This road is not upsized for any through traffic. There's no chance that this will ever extend. The only people utilizing this road are the people that live there on it. The city had a policy that all the roads should be paved, and so the city went in and paved this road. The cost was $6,600. The city paid half. The residents paid half. We asked the question, based on the taxes the city is collecting from the people within that development, how long is it going to take them to recoup the half the cost they had to spend on the road? The answer is 37 years. Now, as an engineer, I know and understand that that road is not going to last 37 years. Yet it's going to take the city that long just to recoup the half that they spent. Now, the second time around, the property owners aren't going to be contributing anything. They're paying taxes for that. And so 100% of the cost is going to be paid by someone else if that road is going to be fixed at all. This is a more suburban subdivision. These are half-acre, three-quarter-acre lots. You can see the lots on the west side are a little bit bigger, but their frontage is minimal. Again, completely residential property, a closed-loop system. There's no through traffic. There's no chance of this ever expanding beyond its current boundaries. The only people utilizing this set of roads are the people who live within this development. This was built in the early 1980s, had completely fallen apart. The city went out and fixed it. The cost was $354,000. We asked the question, based on the taxes the city's collecting from the people who use this road within this development, how long will it take them to recoup what they just spent fixing it? The answer is 79 years. We then asked the question, okay, let's pretend that the city wants to collect enough money from these property owners to fix their road by the time the road needs to be fixed again. What would that mean? It would mean they would immediately need to increase taxes by 46% and then annually increase them by 3% over inflation every year for the next 25 years, with all of that additional revenue going just for road maintenance. Now, I used to go on, and I'd have about a dozen of these, and I would just beat people over the head till they got the point. I discovered after a while that I can just do 3 and people get the idea. So I'm going to switch to a commercial property now, because often people will say, well, Chuck, okay, we get that we lose money on commercial or on residential property, but we make it up ultimately on commercial. Commercial is our cash cow. To which I always respond immediately, well, I don't know any corporation that loses money on 90% of its transactions and then tries to make it up on the last 10%. I don't know why an incorporated municipality would operate that way. Nonetheless, if that's the notion, it's also a false one. This is a business park. This is the kind of thing that cities are building. In fact, in Lexington last night, we got hit up on one of these that they're trying to build up there. This is the kind of thing you build out on the edge of town to try to attract all the new technology, all the new businesses to come in. This one was built in the mid-1990s. It's completely built out. Every lot is occupied. The city felt it was so successful that they wanted to repeat it again on property they own just adjacent to it. They just want to mirror this exact same development. So we asked the question, if we could do this exact same development again and get the exact same amount of investment, would that be a good transaction? The cost in today's dollars would be $2.1 million. We can look and see exactly what tax base is out there. It's $6.6 million. Now, pause here for a second and understand that of the lots that are developed in this park, 4 of them are churches. Now, I go to church. Churches are a very important part of our community, but the church is not paying any taxes to the city. 2 of the lots are a school bus maintenance facility. My children go to school. Schools are a very important part of the community, but the school district is not paying any money to the city. 1 of the lots is a county maintenance garage. 1 of the lots is a city maintenance garage. Of the remaining lots in this park, the ones that are theoretically private sector taxpayers, every single one was either sold for $1 and or they were given a long-term tax subsidy in order to attract the business to the park. For the sake of our analysis, we assumed that every single lot would develop within 12 months, a very aggressive schedule. Every single one would be private sector taxpayers, and none of them would receive a subsidy. If that were the case, and if every penny of revenue were devoted to debt service, it would still take the city almost 3 decades, 29 years, just to break even on this project. That's 3 decades where everybody else's taxes would need to go up to mow the ditches, provide police protection, fire protection, and every other service that would be needed out in this park. Here's what's going on from a cash flow standpoint. Let's pretend that a developer comes to town, and the developer says, I would like to build a new development. I'm not asking for any special variances from your rules. I'm not asking for any subsidies. I'm not asking for anything. I'm willing to go build everything by your requirements. I'll build all the homes. I'll build all the businesses. I'll build all the strip malls and big box and whatever the development is. I'll build it all. And when I'm done, you will have the tax base, and I will donate the infrastructure to the city. What would we say? If we're like every other city in this country, we would say, wow, that's a great transaction. We spend absolutely nothing, and we get all of this new tax base and new revenue. Let's say, though, that as part of it, we said, you know, we weren't really planning on this whole development. Let's be prudent about this. Let's take the money that now is coming in that we weren't planning on, and we'll set aside the portion that would normally go to infrastructure maintenance. And every year when that money comes in, we'll set it aside and we'll allow it to grow. And then, 25 years from now, when we have to go out and fix some of this stuff, we'll go grab that money out of the savings account and we'll use that to fix it. Here's what it would look like. In the first year, you'd have a little bit of money coming in. Everything is brand new, so there's no money going out. In year 2, a little bit more money comes in, so you add to what you had in year 1. In year 3, you add a little bit more. In year 4, you add a little bit more. And you can see, cumulatively over time, you keep adding money. And by the time you get 2 decades out, you've got quite a pile of change. You still haven't had to go out and fix anything because it's all still relatively new. But then in year 25, when you have to go out and do a maintenance project, you actually have to go out and make good on that obligation you took on in year 1 when you accepted that donated infrastructure. What you find is that the cumulative amount of revenue that you brought in is insufficient to cover that cost. And from a cash flow standpoint, you go far into the negative. Now, a city is not one development. A city is a collection of developments. So let's say that our developer comes in 2 years later and says, that development really worked out well for me. It worked out well for you. Let's do a similar transaction. And 2 years later comes in and does another, and 2 years later another, and 2 years later another. So what we're talking about here is the ideal situation for a city, a situation where you have nice, steady, continuous growth over time. And we take the money that would go to infrastructure maintenance and we set it aside and we allow it to accumulate. What you see is that your revenue starts to actually accelerate upwards. As each new development comes online, you're adding more and more revenue to your pot. You're generating more and more cash. And when you get to year 25, where you have to make good on that initial promise you made in year 1, it's okay. You've got the money because you've had all of this growth. This is what we call the illusion of prosperity. Because, of course, we all kind of intuitively understand that if you lose money on every transaction, you don't make it up in volume. If you lose money on every project that you do, ultimately, the further you go out into the time horizon, the more downward pressure there is on your budget. Now, we started this conversation by saying this is a very young experiment, untested by the rigors of time. We're barely 60 years into it. But I've had people stand up and say, well, Chuck, I get it, and I understand what you're saying, but according to you, we should have gone broke a long time ago. How have we dealt with this? And the answer is simple. This is a graph of debt. Now, we're all familiar with the narrative about our public sector debt, right? Our public sector debt is enormous, trillions of dollars. I've had 7 quarters of calculus. I'm not going to pretend to be able to explain what $1 trillion is. I can't comprehend it. When I was a little kid, we had the Weekly Reader. You guys remember the Weekly Reader? The Weekly Reader had a little breakout box that said, you know, if you converted the national debt to dollar bills and put them back to back, it would go to the moon and back 23 times. You know, as if replacing one abstract concept with another abstract concept would make things crystal clear to a 4th grader, right? So our national debt, our public debt, is this enormous, unfathomable sum of money. In this drawing here, the blue line on the bottom is our federal debt. The black line is our GDP. The green one, the one that soars up exponentially, that's our private sector debt. That's debt that you and I have. That's home mortgages, credit cards, auto loans, student loans, margin interest accounts, commercial real estate loan. That's private sector debt. The way we financed the first generation of this great experiment was by using our savings and reinvesting that illusion of prosperity back into creating more growth. When that became insufficient to keep everything going, we gradually shifted from an economy based on growth through savings and investment to an economy based on growth through debt accumulation. And you can see, as we crossed over into the 3rd life cycle, that growth from debt accumulation became so important to keeping everything going that we actually allowed it to become predatory. We actually allowed people, and we created systems that encouraged people who could not afford homes to buy homes. People who could afford small homes to buy medium-sized homes. People who could afford medium homes to buy large homes. People who could afford large homes to buy multiple large homes. Our ability to continue this experiment by having the private sector take on more and more increasing levels of debt is just simply not there. And so there's some serious implications. The mechanisms of growth we become accustomed to are waning. The federal government, the state government do not have the money to inject in creating growth in every city around the state that needs it. The DOTs across this country, including yours, are functionally broke, having literally 25, 30 cents on the dollar of what they need long-term to maintain everything that they built. They're not going to be investing in things that will create new growth at the local level. The private sector is tapped out and unable to take on the accelerating levels of debt needed to keep this all going. What this means is that local governments are going to be forced to absorb the cost of the current development pattern. If we want that road fixed, we're going to have to pay for it. If we want that pipe repaired, that's going to come from us. If we want the new big facility or civic building or whatever it is, we're going to have to collectively pool our resources in order to make that happen. This can't be done in the current pattern of development without large tax increases and or large cuts in services. Now, Joe and I weren't invited here to speak to you to tell you what you already know, right? This is the struggle that we're having at every level of government. How big is the tax increase going to be? Who's going to pay for it? How deep is the service cut going to be? And where is it going to be felt? It is critical at the local level that we see the 3rd variable in that sentence. The 3rd variable being the current pattern of development. As long as we continue to build places that are functionally insolvent, there is no amount of tax increase and there's no amount of service cut that can fix that. As long as we continue to build places in a pattern that costs us more over the long term than it generates in wealth, there's no way that our cities can avoid insolvency. We literally need to change the way we are building our places. So, what do we do given this complex set of problems? I had to put this in because I would go and talk to groups, and I would have a period where we talk about, here's the things we need to do, and Joe's going to kind of handle a lot of that tonight for us. He's going to be the happy guy that gives you the good news. But I always have people at the end stand up and say, well, Chuck, I've heard everything you've said, and I get what you're saying, but you didn't tell us the solution. I'm kind of mad at you. What's the solution? And what I realized I was being asked was not what I was hearing. What I was hearing is, what's the solution? But what I was really being asked was, what can someone else change about what they're doing so that I don't have to change anything about what I'm doing? I don't know of any such solution. We've literally created for ourselves a complex set of problems to which we're going to need to collectively respond rationally to. And that's going to mean having an entire different conversation about how we create wealth, how we create prosperity, and how we are going to finance this great experiment at the local level. I'm going to end with this, and I appreciate the fact that the Field of Dreams came up earlier tonight. I'm a huge baseball fan. We are in what we call the desperation phase of this suburban experiment. The phase where at the local government level we're so desperate for growth that we are doing literally crazy things to try to create it. And this is, not a commentary on Greensboro as much as it is a commentary on this nation. This is every city across the country is in this position. Build It and They Will Come is a brilliant movie plot. You've got baseball, you've got cornfields, you've got Iowa, it's got everything, right? It is a horrible economic development strategy. I can't tell you how many underutilized places I've seen across this country that were built on the Build It and They Will Come premise. Build It and They Will Come is a very modern American ideal. This is not how people built wealth historically throughout all of history. The way we built it was like this. This is my hometown back in 1870. It's about a block off the railroad tracks. It's about 500 feet from the river. These were a bunch of illiterate lumberjacks in the north woods of Minnesota. Today, this is 2.5 hours away from Minneapolis-St. Paul. Back then, it was multiple days' journey from civilization. These people went in, they planed some wood, they threw up some shop storefronts, they put in some windows, and they had a little city. We built thousands of these across the country, and a lot of them failed. When they failed, did the Wall Street banks go under and need a huge bailout? Did the government have to come in and make people whole so that the economy wouldn't collapse? Did the grocery stores not have stuff on the shelves? No. What happened is there was a tiny investment. There wasn't much at risk. They just plucked the glass out of the windows, pulled down the iron, and moved on to the next city. These were small incremental investments. But a lot of places, those small incremental investments worked. They became successful, productive. And what you found is that over time, this exact same street became this. This is 30 years later. I showed you this photo earlier. 30 years later, this exact same street became that. Now, was there any huge Build It and They Will Come investment that was made here? Was there any game-changing investment? Did they do any tax subsidies? Did they get any federal grants? No, none of that stuff. Do you know what they did? They just built in small little increments over a broad platform, over a long period of time. We all understand how to create wealth. You don't create wealth at the casino. You create wealth by working hard, being prudent, and investing small sums over a long period of time. And when you do that, what you see is a street that begins like this, and 30 years later becomes this, 40 years later turns into a place with granite and rock facades. A place that looks a lot like the great street you've got out front here. This place out front here was not built by some grand speculative venture. It was not built by outside money. It was built by you, slowly, over time, incrementally. That is a really powerful observation because we are in an era and an age where everything is tightening up. And we're finding we have less and less to do more and more. We have the capacity among us to build fantastic, great places. Places that will be great for the people that live here. Places that will make us wealthier and better off. Places that will be wonderful to live in, raise kids in, grow old in. We have that capacity to do that here. And I hope that you all will see that the incremental approach is the way we get that done.
Chuck and I have a similar message from a different angle. And in working with Chuck and knowing Chuck's work, a lot of it is the lessons that we bring and the stories that we tell. And I want to put a couple of my lessons up front on how I see cities, and I think that you'll see how Chuck and I are similar in this. How many of y'all have seen me speak before? We've got a couple. Okay, so don't yell out the answers or laugh at the jokes too early, but there's ways that I see cities are a lot like the way that I see humans. And for me, humans have a DNA. So if you want to see how I started, this is how I started my life when I had hair and I was 3 months old and with a barrette in my hair even. And this is what I'm going to become, right? So I'm going to become Papa, whether I like it or not. And you all experience this with your families, right? You understand this. This is my dad, so I will become my father. Now, there's blessings and curses in that. Now, I'm genetically Italian. You can tell from my name. I'm also have a genetic predisposition to heart disease. That's evident in my family. Every Minicosi male has had a heart issue by the time they're about 60 years old. My dad has had a 6 bypass heart surgery. So I know that, I don't know, what do you call that, like a septuple heart surgery or something? I don't even know the name. But I know that's in me. Now, I've got a problem. Being Italian, I like to eat. I love bacon. I love key lime pie. I love eating a lot of food. My mom's a great cook. But I'll have to deal with those issues that come with that eating. You know, I had the chicken and waffles down the street, so I've got to exercise now. But, you know, we know this. We know this in ourselves. Cities are no different. They have a DNA. What kind of heart attacks have y'all had? Who's Greensboro's grandparent? What do y'all want to be when you grow up? You know? You've got a trajectory of growth one way or another, or a trajectory of death. It's your choice. So this is your community, and how you talk about these things is up to you. So I'm just putting that one lesson up front. The second lesson I want to put up front is a lesson of asking the right questions. What Chuck and I do is bring different questions to you all to see different realities and solutions. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds to take a look at this kid's puzzle. It's fairly easy. So just if you could, just tell me how many shapes you see in this next image. And again, those of you that have seen this before, don't shout out the answers. But those that are new to this test, please do. So it's 5 seconds. Tell me how many shapes you see. Go. Okay. How many shapes? 9? 4? 17? 21? 8? Anybody want to go lower than 4 or higher than 21? Higher? How many kids were on the school bus? Anyone? What time was it on the clock? So our brains work in curious ways. We actually will focus on and filter out information. You don't see the 5 kids on the school bus, you don't know it's 10 after 10, because your mind steered in on the question I asked you. When you talk about your city and there's questions put before you, I put in all the information on the table. You know, what Chuck and I are doing is we're basically seeing information that's out right in front of us, hiding in plain sight. I didn't hide the children. I didn't mask the clock, did I? You know, but our reality and the way that our brains work will shift based on what's before us. So when you have conversations about your community, make sure you're collecting all of the data. Make sure you're asking questions about the children. You know, so this is all basically the things, the biggest lesson in what Chuck and I do. So let's go ahead and take a huge step out. Who's been to Asheville before? Everybody? Is there anybody that's not been to Asheville? I should start asking that in here. So there's Asheville. Y'all know where it is. This is how Asheville started, very similar to Chuck's world. This is a shot down Main Street. Y'all have stood there. This is late 1800s downtown Asheville. That 30 years later became this. We like to say that the 3 T's made Asheville: trains, tourism, and tuberculosis. That once the train lines came, it brought all these people up there. We had the second streetcar line in the entire country. Presidents came to visit. We still have presidents. Obama keeps on showing up for our barbecue. During the 1920s, though, not a lot of people know this, we grew by 20% every year throughout the 20s. We were the second largest city in North Carolina. The only city that was bigger than Asheville was Winston-Salem. During that period, we amassed the highest debt per capita of the entire United States. We were number 1 in debt. When the Depression hit and our books were audited, we thought we had $18,000 in the bank. It turned out, or $5 million in the bank. It turned out we had $18,000 in the bank. Our city council was indicted, and then the mayor committed suicide. That's how we entered the Depression. Thomas Wolfe, the famous American author, had this to say about his hometown. Asheville has squandered fabulous sums. They've flung away the earnings of a lifetime. They've mortgaged those of a generation to come. They have ruined a city. And in doing so, they've ruined themselves, their children, and their children's children. Talk about naming names, right? Incidentally, the name of his second book was called You Can't Go Home Again, for obvious reasons. It took us until 1976 to pay off that debt. We paid it off slowly since 1930, basically. But when we did come out of that debt cycle, we started taking advantage of these federal systems that Chuck was talking about. We plowed a highway through the north side of downtown called the Crosstown Expressway, and then the coup de grace was when we blew the mountain open called the Beaucatcher Cut, which the mall happened on the other side of that and downtown died. Familiar story? And this happened all across the country. These are lovely shots of downtown Asheville. I mean, look at these tremendous real estate opportunities right here for you to redevelop. Why don't you all come up there and help us fix a building or two? I mean, this is not so long ago. This is the 1990s in downtown Asheville. Look at all these boarded up buildings just sitting here. So this is we covered things up with aluminum and hoped that they just disappeared or something. And like a Greek choir, anytime somebody tried to fix downtown or do something downtown, the children's children would rise up and say, that'll never work here, don't even try. We're not like that place, we're different people. And this generational issue is still a problem in Asheville. People, when I go, especially around this state, they're like, oh, Asheville's so wonderful. And I'm like, come up to Asheville and see some of this. We still have debates about fixing our downtown, which is kind of silly. So an interesting home story and something that really it kind of makes me proud to be here in Greensboro is it's actually one of your folks that actually has had the biggest change in Asheville, and it's Julian Price. Julian's from Greensboro. His family is part of the Jefferson Pilot Insurance Company. He brought his inheritance up to Asheville as a philanthropist and converted it into a real estate development project. Julian created the Public Interest Projects, which is a for-profit real estate development company. He's the shoulders at which I stand on. It's because of Julian that our development company got off the ground. He put 75% of his wealth, of his inheritance, into the sticks and bricks, and reserved 25% to seed businesses. So like the Laughing Seed restaurant, that's one of our projects. We put those chefs into business and financed their restaurant. They've since bought us out, and they're one of the anchors to downtown. But all of this is because of Julian. So this is one of the buildings that we rehabbed before and after. And I'll ask the audiences this question usually. These are 400 to 600 square foot apartments. Who in this room would live in a 400 to 600 square foot apartment? Anyone? Got 5, 6 people? Let me change the question. Who in this room has lived in a 400 to 600 square foot apartment? You know, that was our massive marketing study right there, by the way. We saved $18,000 by basically asking a few people, have you ever lived in a 600 square foot apartment? You know, we looked at the 83,000 people and realized that 26 units, not a whole lot of risk. We just thought differently about our community. The other thing that Julian was doing that was fairly significant, this is what Asheville looked like when he was still alive, and he published his own newspaper. And this is one of the articles from the newspaper. And interestingly, he quoted Arthur Frommer. Among cities with no particular recreation appeal, those that have preserved their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourism simply doesn't go to a city that's lost its soul. Now, Julian wasn't a huge fan of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, but what he was trying to do is he was trying to deal with those children's children that had a problem with the city. And he was trying to get people to preserve buildings and maintain the downtown. Interestingly, 15 years after he published this, Frommer's magazine would list us as number 5 place in the country to visit. And I think that's kind of special. And again, he's one of your hometown folks. But what was happening in downtown is through those investments of fixing up, and this isn't all just us, there's lots of investors that worked in downtown, but by fixing those existing buildings, these 2 step-ups over that period of time was just by filling up those upper stories, by polishing what we had. We didn't get new buildings until around 2008. Right now, our downtown is approaching $1 billion worth of value, which is kind of phenomenal, considering where we started. So what we try to do is think of it a little bit differently. If we thought about the city the way that a farmer thought about crops, would we think of it differently financially? So let's take one of our buildings that we rehabbed. This is ground floor retail, second floor office, upper stories residential. When we bought the building, it was worth $300,000 on the tax rolls. Through our efforts, it's now around $11 million of value for the building. So that represents a 3,500% tax penalty, right? We fix the building, we pay more taxes. That's one way of looking at it. Or the other way of looking at it is our community now has 3,500% more community wealth thanks to this rehab. And we like to think of it that way, that our community can now afford more stuff. Let me change the way that we think about this. Now, how does that building or this Walmart, or that's my house, that's my wife Caroline and our dogs. Our dogs are a little weird, they think they're lions. But when people see these buildings, they immediately go, well, Joe, this is a $20 million building, and that's significant, right? Caroline and I pay $2,000. We're on 1/10 of an acre. If you had a 1-acre cookie cutter that you dropped into my neighborhood, you'd pull out $20,000 in taxes. Does that make sense? If we're all paying $2,000 in taxes, we're all on 1/10 of an acre lots, that's what you get, right? If you took that same 1-acre cookie cutter and dropped it on Walmart, you get $6,500 an acre in taxes. Now let's take a look at our building downtown. So if you're running a corporation called the City of Asheville, what kind of revenue yield would you want to have for your crops? Would you want 6,000, 20,000, or 600,000? Now I tried to make this point clear for folks in California. I was there last month, and I said to them, I'm like, look, if y'all only had an acre of land to grow something in California, what would you grow? Wheat, soybeans, or marijuana? And they got it. This joke actually works in Colorado too now, thanks. It's pretty good. So anyway, you're probably saying, you know, Joe, that's not fair. There's retail taxes, you know, so let's go ahead and remove me. And again, the misnomer with retail taxes, particularly at a city level, is the cities get very little retail tax in return at a municipal level in this state. And if you take the average sales of a Walmart, it's around 77 million. This is our tax rate. That tax dollar travels up to Raleigh. Raleigh takes a chunk. It comes back to the county takes a piece. And in the year that I ran this, the city was getting about 27 cents on the dollar. That's actually dropped to about 9 cents on the dollar now. But let's just keep it up to 27%, just for the heck of it. So that's $47,000 in taxes per acre. You add that to the retail or to the property taxes, now you're at $51,000 an acre of taxes for the Walmart. That's just the property taxes of our building in downtown. You add the retail taxes to it, now you're cooking with gas. Jobs per acre. I mean, what do you want to talk about? It's amazing. You put them all side by side. Ours even has residences per acre. The reason why we built cities this way for thousands and thousands of years is because it's efficient and it puts more stuff in less space. And this is what it also provides more wealth. Does this all make sense to y'all? One of my friends calls this the Moneyball shot on cities. You know, if you just look at the data and let your biases disappear and ask a different question, you'll see different information. And that's all we're doing here. So what we're seeing also is that there's a production level at a county level too. That was just the city side. So this is my county's tax yield per acre, because every resident of Asheville is a resident of Buncombe County too, right? Y'all are residents of Guilford County. So the average city resident is paying about $1,700 an acre in county taxes. The county resident's paying about $1,200 an acre in county taxes. So right out the door, you see a city resident pays more county taxes than a county resident. Oh, incidentally, we like to pick on the Biltmore estate too. They've got a lovely tax break. But putting that aside, this is the mall at $8,000 an acre of county taxes, and then here's residential. So you see commercial actually is very productive, right? Well, let's not stop there. Let's go into downtown, and here's our building downtown at $250,000 an acre in county taxes. Here's the mall at $8,000 an acre in county taxes. What's crazy about this bar chart is, let's look at a 4-story building. A 4-story building or a 2-story building. A 4-story building is producing $45,000 an acre in county taxes versus the mall at $8,000. So what we're allowing ourselves to do is we're building ourselves poor, basically. We're getting a very low level of return on these 1-story buildings. Once you start stacking buildings, you're stacking your wealth. Does that make sense? So this isn't scary math that I'm doing here, people. This is 5th grade division. I'm not a math whiz. I don't have a finance degree. I actually failed my calculus. Sorry, Chuck. But you have to ask the question: where does government get its money? And reading what incorporation is, this is from Webster's dictionary. Incorporation is the forming of a new corporation. The corporation may be a business, a nonprofit organization, a sports club, or a government of a new city or town. So basically, y'all elect a board of directors to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. So the citizen is a shareholder in two corporations, the city and the county. So having the county part of this conversation is very important. And what's good for the downtown is great for the city, but it's incredible for the county. So you're just dealing with a boundary of land that's run by a corporation of elected officials. Now, when a developer builds this godforsaken place somewhere in Arizona, if I were to build this, when I build it, I keep track of all the costs in there, the roads, the sewers, the permitting, the plans, whatever, and I just divide it by the rooftops. When government gets this thing plugged onto the street, do they do the same? And we saw with Chuck that they don't. The numbers don't match up. And what's crazy is we're not the first people to do this, to talk about the cost of this land use pattern. It's actually this guy here produced this document called The Cost of Sprawl in 1973. Did y'all know that he wrote this book or got this thing published? All of the work that Chuck and I do is basically in this document. And this is stuff we need to understand. So we were in Sarasota doing a study. We did their chart. We had to turn the bar chart sideways because it just got obscene. But they had this cost document for residential units. And basically the public facility costs per dwelling unit. The state costed out and figured out what it cost to service somebody living in a downtown versus somebody living in a burb somewhere in Palm Beach County. These are all real places in Florida. So we took somebody living downtown and somebody in the burbs, and we ran the numbers on this. So here's the burbs, here's the urban environment. Let's take 357 units in both and run them side by side. So this is the land consumed in the downtown environment and in the suburban environment for the same number of dwelling units. So the pattern of development consumes 1/10 the land area of your corporation. It costs you 57% as much to service those individuals, yet you make 830% more money. So that all makes, I mean, this is straight out of their tax records. This is really easy to get. So you're making 830% more, and it's costing you 57% as much. So if this is my mortgage, and that's my annual payment, this is Chuck's mortgage and his annual payment, how long will it take the two of us to pay off our notes? So it takes me 42 years to pay off. It takes Chuck 3. So in real estate development world, if this is my cost, this is my revenue, and this is my time, I can run an ROI, right? So the county's ROI in this is a 2% ROI for the suburban development, and it's a 18% ROI for the urban investment. Is this all too dorky for you guys? You're pretty quiet. This isn't freaky, is it? Okay. So I was presenting this in Idaho, and somebody's like, look, Joe, we're just cowboys out here in Idaho. You gotta this is way too many bar charts. So they said, could you do it in a different way? Could you just show it to me in year 20? So in year 20, the county's made $34 million off the downtown housing. This is the county. And they're still in the hole $5 million where the housing is actually out in the county. Does that make sense? When you look at your annual budgets, we don't geospatially position where the money's going to and coming from. We don't think of it from a locational standpoint. So Chief Justice Brandeis was right. These are the relentless rules of humble arithmetic. This is very simple math to be producing. We've done this all across the country, mashing up every city that we've been to. We see the same pattern over and over again. For every dollar of county taxes a county resident pays per acre to the county, the city resident's paying about $8, the Walmart's paying about $7, the mall's paying about $14, and this is in county taxes. As soon as you get to a 2-story building, you start to see it shoot up, and it's real simple. You're just stacking the stories. Every new story is paying a taxable basis, and it's not proportional, it's exponential. So what I'm trying to do is frame the question differently of how we look at land. When we look at cars, we don't say what the miles per tank is, do we? We don't say, well, what's your miles per tank? Has anybody ever done that with y'all? Is that how you compare cars? I mean, if we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank. When we talk about buildings, it's always the big numbers, the $20 million Walmart. Well, how did it consume the land? The land is the finite object there. You only have so much of it, and particularly now with this new legislation from our state. So we say miles per gallon because that's the non-renewable resource. So when I say miles per gallon, the numbers change. I didn't change the cars. And we should all be driving BMW Asettas at 70 miles per gallon. Sorry to your Prius owners, but 1955 technology beats it. So we talk about these charts. Now Mark asked us, he's like, well, could you do it for this region? By the way, this is the region of part. And you can see here's Charlotte, and Charlotte kind of takes a big bite out of this corner here. But y'all are up here, and I thought, well, that's a big area. You know, to put it in the context of what he has to deal with from a regional transportation standpoint, I dropped it on New York State, and it basically goes from Ontario to Pennsylvania. Or if you dropped it on Connecticut, it's like the whole size of Connecticut and chops into Massachusetts. I mean, think about that. If you have friends that commute across this region, from Burlington to Winston-Salem, that's like driving across Connecticut. It's insane. But anyway, put the other side. It's a big area. Oh yeah, we dropped it into Europe for the heck of it. There's Switzerland. It's like half of Belgium or half of Denmark or half of Amsterdam. It's all of London. That's kind of crazy. Now the commerce in this area, and you all understand this being in a large city, is that the cities in this triad region from Burlington, Greensboro, High Point area, and then Winston-Salem, it's $23 billion, $33 billion, and $5 billion of gross domestic product that these cities produce in the state. So it's a very powerful economic engine that you all have here. I'm not even going to bother explaining this in detail, but we've mapped the whole region on a value per acre basis. Mark will have all of these maps that you can look at in detail. But basically, this is the value per acre, and this is, in red, it's 10 million an acre, and you can kind of see Greensboro popping out there. But we'll get back into this. I'll just kind of skip through these. All of these are very dorky, but it's kind of, so Greensboro. So looking at your downtown on a value per acre basis, here's Elm Street here. Purple is greater than $6 million, $6,500,000 an acre. And so you're seeing purples here on Elm Street. You're also seeing a purple or two popping up on South Side. And then you see how it drops off almost immediately once you leave the core of your downtown. This is, to put it in context, this is the Friendly Avenue shopping area. There's no purples out here. It's all in the $350,000 to $800,000 an acre. This is kind of fun. We actually dropped it in Google Earth, and y'all can get a copy of this from Mark and play around with it. It's really, I mean, this is like, maybe I'm too dorky about this, but this is really cool. But this, y'all see, guess where your downtown is, right? There it is, boom. What's interesting about this, so you've got a lot of higher density stuff in here. It's a really tight downtown. You've got a couple of spots where it pops up, but generally it's pretty low value per acre, which means a low revenue per acre as well. Y'all get it? That just for the heck of it, we kind of threw High Point in here. And High Point just flattens out real quick. They actually do have pretty powerful value in their downtown because they have those really expensive big convention things that are paying high taxes, but they're not used all that often. And then secondly, there almost is nothing left once you leave the downtown there. But these are your brothers and sisters in Guilford County. So y'all are paying county taxes based on that model. So basically your Kmart is worth about $600,000 an acre. Your Walmart's worth about $800,000 an acre. So less than $1 million an acre. You get out to the Friendly area, it's about $1 million an acre. And that's for all of this stuff. You get out to the Target's actually by itself is a little bit more than Friendly at about $1.1 million an acre. The Curry Convention Center, when you just take this piece of it with the convention center and the mall, it's about $2.2 million an acre, so double the Friendly. But when you add in all of the real area that's out there, this other part of it, it actually drops in value down to $1.7 million an acre. So coming into the south side, this part of the neighborhood is averaging twice Friendly and about the Curry Convention Center value per acre on a production standpoint. The south side tower homes, and I know that some people don't like them, I talked to you earlier, but they're $3 million an acre of value. So a townhouse inside the south side is pulling about $4 million an acre, or 4 times the production of Friendly. And the City View apartments are doing quite well at $3 million an acre. Other townhomes, you can see that these are $1 million less an acre versus the brick ones, so that's kind of a difference there. And your townhouses are actually doing all right. The same developer that built those also built these in Charlotte. Now these are between $6 and $3 million. You're kind of somewhere in the middle of that at $4 million an acre. Here's your proximity hotel at $3 million an acre. And when you start getting into the Main Street, into the infill development, this is showing you how productive this stuff is. This building right here on Elm Street, this was a 5-story building, $14 million an acre of value. And then this is your Crest at $14 million again. 324 South Elm, it's not even occupied in the upper stories. That still has to fill out, but that's producing a tax base of $17 million an acre of value. Julian's family's building is $37 million an acre, and then the Center Point condos is $87 million an acre. That's 87 times the value of your Friendly Plaza on a per acre basis. So what this chart looks like, this is your tax revenue of your Guilford County tax base. So the county residents here, on average, are paying about $2,000 in taxes per acre, where the city residents paying about $2,300 in county taxes. Kmart's at $2,400. There's Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, Friendly Center, right here at $4,300 an acre in county taxes. This is Southside total at $9,000 an acre in taxes. I know we have a lot of Southside people here. You're very productive. You're twice a target. And then you get into, let's see, these are the City View apartments, the Rainbow townhomes, the Southside townhomes at $17,000. This is the average for the historic core of downtown at $30,000 an acre of county taxes. And then you get into 360 South Elm at $61,000. This is the Crest building. This is 324 South Elm. This is the Jefferson Pilot building, and right here is the city Center Point condos at $376,000 of county taxes per acre. So let's kind of get to the end here. So basically 2.2 acres of those townhouses will equal the entire 15-acre Friendly Center Plaza. Does that make sense? Y'all follow this? Or 7.5 acres of this will equal the Friendly Plaza area. Or to bring Guilford County into this, and we take the Oak Hollow Mall that's down in High Point. Now again, that's another piece of Guilford County, right? So 1.9 acres of this will equal the 62-acre that. Or 11 acres of this will equal the entire 89-acre Curry Plaza. Only 2.3 acres of this will equal the Curry Plaza, which is kind of wild. Now again, as you think about these choices in your community and how you build, think about the revenue return you're getting on these things and the cost of infrastructure around them. And we have this ability to plan for that. This is from a kid's book on city planning from 1932. V is for value, not measured in wealth. Planners think wisely, weighing comfort and health. You know, think of the wealth that you produce in your community and how you can deal with the cost that they cover. So think about this model and how to get more, you know, grow some more purples, but also this stuff's not so bad either in the reds and the pinks. So look at this model, play with it. It's really a lot of fun. And also understand that there's behavioral things inside the system that you're dealing with. This is how buildings were taxed in England for 100 years based on the number of windows you had. And what people started doing is they boarded up the windows to avoid the taxes. In France, you're taxed below your roof line. And this architect, Francois Mansart, came up with this crafty way of sticking stories up in the roof, hence the term mansard roof. This is where it came from, was a tax loophole. When you look at the landscape, there are things that are built into the landscape that afford me a subsidy. Now this is an example. In land, you have two values. You have the value of your dirt and the value of your building on top of the dirt. We took a map, we did this in your community as well. We took the buildings off and just looked at the dirt value per acre. So what's everybody paying per gallon of gas, or what's the per acre tax yield? And you expect the neighborhood to look like this, right? Everybody in the neighborhood's light blue. And I was presenting this is Cheyenne, by the way, Cheyenne, Wyoming. I was like, what's going on here where this is $15,000 an acre, and as soon as you cross the street, it jumps up to $35,000 an acre. And the tax assessor raises her hand. We don't have anybody from the tax assessment department, do we? No, good, okay. So she raises her hand and she's like, Joe, you don't understand. And I said, what don't I understand? She goes, well, the more land you have, the lower the value. Think about that. So if I said to her, I said, so if I've got 3/4 of a mile of a road here, 3/4 of a mile of road here, another half mile and half mile, you're gonna give me a discount rate on the land even though I've got 3 miles of infrastructure? Do y'all follow that? I pay less taxes if I have a bigger piece of property. And I said, I've got more zoning capacity here. I can put more stuff. I've got more infrastructure. You're going to give me a cheaper rate? And she's like, yeah, that's our standard. I said, well, where'd you get the standard? Did Moses deliver it to you? I mean, come on. You know, can you not get rid of it? Do you understand that this is financially undermining your ability to finance your own city if you give me that gift? Where do you find big parcels? They're certainly not downtown. So looking around, we see this all the time. This is Chattanooga, for example. What's going on here on one side of this neighborhood it's pink, on the other side it's green. So basically this parcel right here, the dirt under that house, is valued at $143,000 an acre. Just crossing the street, it drops down to $36,000 an acre. You know, the assessment methodology is seen as a science, but it's really not. It's an art masquerading as a science. We see, here's High Point. Check this out. This is purple at $1,500 an acre. Just going right next door, it drops down to $700 an acre. So this is happening within your assessment methodology, and you need to understand that if you're going to be conversant about your values. So realize these aren't invisible market forces that make developers build in your community. We follow the paths of least resistance, and your policies could actually affect that.